The worst kind of loneliness is pretending you're okay, while the whole room watches you fall apart. Emily Carter stood frozen just inside the entrance of Bellamy's Steakhouse, clutching the strap of her worn beige purse while warm golden light spilled across the marble floor beneath her feet. Around her, couples laughed softly over glasses of wine, silverware chimed against expensive plates, and somewhere near the back of the restaurant, a piano player drifted through an old Frank Sinatra song that used to make her believe in forever. Tonight it only made her chest ache. The hostess smiled politely at first, but the expression faded the second she checked the reservation list again. "Reservation for Carter," Emily said quietly. "Table for two." The young hostess glanced up. "Your husband hasn't arrived yet?" The question hit harder than Emily expected. She swallowed before answering. "No. It's just me." For half a second, the hostess looked embarrassed. Then came the awkward sympathy Emily had learned to hate. "Oh, I'm sorry." Emily forced a smile that felt fragile enough to crack. She almost turned around right then. Maybe she should have stayed home in her tiny apartment eating microwaved mac and cheese with Liam asleep on the couch beside her. Maybe coming here had been a mistake. But tonight marked what would have been her 10th wedding anniversary, and some foolish part of her had wanted to prove she could survive it without crying. The hostess grabbed 2 menus before hesitating again. "Actually," she lowered her voice, "this reservation has been prepaid for months." Emily's stomach tightened. She already knew who had paid for it. Her ex-husband Ryan. The same man who had forgotten her birthdays for years, but somehow remembered this reservation because he had made it before leaving her for a younger woman 18 months ago. Emily stared at the candlelit dining room while humiliation crept up her neck. Around her, women in elegant dresses leaned against successful husbands with Rolex watches and confident smiles. Emily suddenly became painfully aware of her department store heels, her simple navy dress, and the fact that she had spent 15 minutes in her car trying to cover dark circles under her eyes with pharmacy concealer. "Miss Carter," the hostess asked gently, "should I cancel the table?" Emily opened her mouth to answer, but movement near the entrance pulled every eye in the restaurant toward the door. A tall man stepped inside surrounded by the cold rush of December air, his charcoal overcoat dusted lightly with snow. Conversations softened instantly. Even Emily recognized him. Nathaniel Brooks, CEO of Brooks Financial Holdings, one of the wealthiest men in Chicago. He looked exactly like the magazines described him, sharp jawline, dark hair touched with silver near the temples, the calm expression of someone used to control. The hostess straightened immediately. 2 businessmen near the bar whispered his name under their breath. Nathaniel barely acknowledged anyone as he removed his gloves slowly, scanning the restaurant once before his eyes landed directly on Emily, and stayed there. Something about the way he looked at her made her pulse stumble. Not curiosity, recognition, as if he already knew her. Emily looked away first. The hostess suddenly panicked. "Mr. Brooks, your private room is ready," but Nathaniel interrupted softly. "Not tonight." Then, before Emily could process what was happening, the billionaire crossed the restaurant floor and stopped beside her table. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Nathaniel pulled out the empty chair across from her, and leaned down just enough for only her to hear him. "Smile," he whispered calmly. "Everyone is watching." Emily could feel every pair of eyes in the restaurant shifting between her and Nathaniel Brooks as he settled calmly into the empty chair across from her like he belonged there all along. Her heart pounded so hard she was certain he could hear it over the piano music. For a moment, she genuinely wondered if she was dreaming. Men like Nathaniel Brooks did not sit with women like her. Men like him belonged on magazine covers and television interviews, not across candlelit tables from exhausted single mothers trying not to cry in public. The hostess blinked in visible confusion. "Mr. Brooks, should I bring your usual?" Nathaniel never looked away from Emily. "2 menus," he said simply. The hostess hurried off immediately. Emily leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I think you have the wrong person." Nathaniel removed his watch slowly and placed it beside his glass. Even that small movement looked controlled, expensive, practiced. "No," he replied quietly. "I do not." Emily stared at him. Up close, he looked older than the photos online. Not old, but tired in a way cameras usually hid. There were faint lines near his eyes, and something heavy behind them that made him seem more human than the billionaire headlines ever did. "Do I know you?" she asked carefully. Nathaniel paused just long enough to make her uneasy. "Not yet." The answer sent confusion twisting through her chest. Before she could respond, a waiter arrived with water and fresh bread, suddenly treating her with the same respect given to every wealthy customer in the room. Emily noticed the difference instantly. 15 minutes ago she had been invisible. Now people smiled at her. The realization made her stomach hurt. Nathaniel seemed to notice that too. "You should eat," he said softly. "You look like you skipped lunch." Emily almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation. "Why are you doing this?" Nathaniel glanced around the restaurant briefly before answering. "Because nobody should sit alone on a night like this." The words landed harder than she expected. Emily looked down at the folded napkin in her lap, suddenly afraid he might see emotion building behind her eyes. "You heard that," she whispered. "The hostess." "I hear more than people think." For a few seconds neither of them spoke. The piano continued somewhere in the background while snow drifted slowly beyond the giant windows facing Michigan Avenue. Nathaniel reached for the second menu and handed it to her first, a simple gesture that somehow felt intimate. "Order whatever you want," he said. Emily shook her head immediately. "I cannot afford this place." "I did not ask what you could afford." His tone stayed calm, but there was something firm beneath it that made arguing feel impossible. Emily looked around again. Several women nearby were openly staring now, whispering behind lifted wine glasses. One man near the bar looked openly annoyed that Nathaniel Brooks was spending his evening with an ordinary woman in a navy dress from a clearance rack. Emily suddenly became aware of how close Nathaniel was leaning toward her. Close enough that anyone watching would assume familiarity. "Mr. Brooks," she began nervously. "Nathaniel," he corrected gently. "I think people are getting the wrong idea." For the first time that evening, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile. More like something he had forgotten how to do naturally. "That is the idea." Emily frowned. "Why would you want people thinking we came here together?" Nathaniel looked toward the entrance of the restaurant as if expecting someone. His expression changed instantly. The warmth disappeared from his face, replaced by cold restraint. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Because in about 60 seconds, he said quietly, "a woman is going to walk through those doors, and I need her to believe you are the most important person in my life." Emily felt the air leave her lungs. "Excuse me," she whispered, but Nathaniel was already sitting straighter, his attention fixed on the entrance behind her. Curiosity pulled Emily to glance over her shoulder, and the second she did, she understood why the entire restaurant suddenly seemed quieter. A tall blonde woman stepped through the front doors wearing a white designer coat draped perfectly over her shoulders, diamonds flashing beneath the chandelier lights as a man in a tuxedo followed closely beside her. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to expensive rooms and immediate attention. The hostess greeted her instantly by name. "Good evening, Ms. Whitmore." Nathaniel's expression hardened in a way that made Emily nervous. "Who is she?" Emily asked softly. "Someone who enjoys winning," he replied. Before Emily could ask another question, Nathaniel reached across the table and gently adjusted the candle closer to her side. It was such a natural movement that anyone watching would assume intimacy between them. "Do not look uncomfortable," he murmured. "You are doing fine." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "I am absolutely not doing fine." To her surprise, Nathaniel almost smiled again. "Good. That sounds believable." The blonde woman spotted Nathaniel almost immediately. Emily watched her entire face change. Surprise first, then irritation, then something colder. She began walking directly toward their table in heels that clicked sharply against the marble floor. Emily suddenly wanted to disappear. "Nathaniel," the woman said smoothly as she stopped beside them, "I did not realize you were here tonight." Nathaniel looked up calmly. "Victoria." Emily noticed he did not stand. That seemed important somehow. Victoria's eyes shifted toward Emily, scanning her carefully from head to toe. Not openly rude. Worse. Measured. Calculating. "And who is this?" she asked. Emily opened her mouth, but Nathaniel answered first. "Emily." Just her first name. The way he said it sounded personal enough to make Emily's pulse skip. Victoria's smile tightened slightly. I see. A long silence followed. Emily could feel herself shrinking under the woman's polished stare. She had spent years around women like this when Ryan started climbing the corporate ladder. Women who could destroy your confidence with one glance and still smile while doing it. Then Nathaniel did something unexpected. He reached for Emily's hand resting beside the wine glass and held it gently between his fingers. Warm, steady, protective. Emily nearly forgot how to breathe. We were about to order dinner, he said calmly. Victoria looked directly at their joined hands. For the first time, her composure cracked just slightly. Interesting, she said softly. I was not aware you were seeing anyone. There are many things you are not aware of. Emily looked at Nathaniel in shock. Whatever history existed between these two clearly ran deeper than she understood. Victoria gave a quiet laugh that sounded practiced. Well, this is unexpected. Her eyes moved toward Emily again. You must be very special. Emily did not know what to say. But before panic could fully take over, Nathaniel squeezed her hand once beneath the candlelight. Small, reassuring, deliberate. She is, he answered before Emily could speak. The restaurant around them suddenly felt impossibly still. Even the piano seemed quieter. Victoria stared at Nathaniel for another second too long before forcing a graceful smile. Enjoy your evening, she said carefully. Then she walked away without another word. Emily waited until Victoria disappeared across the dining room before finally pulling her hand back. Her skin still felt warm where Nathaniel had touched her. Okay, she whispered breathlessly. You seriously need to explain what is happening. Nathaniel watched Victoria take her seat across the room before finally turning back toward Emily. His expression softened again the second his eyes met hers. I will, he said quietly. But first I need to know something. Emily frowned. What? Nathaniel studied her face for a long moment, almost like he was searching for proof of something impossible. Then he asked softly, why did you stop believing you deserved to be loved? Emily stared at Nathaniel across the candlelit table, completely unprepared for the question he had just asked. For a moment she forgot about the crowded restaurant, the elegant music, even Victoria Whitmore watching from across the room. All she could hear was the quiet sincerity in his voice. That is a strange thing to ask someone you just met, she said carefully. Nathaniel held her gaze without hesitation. Maybe. Emily looked down at the untouched bread basket between them. People do not just stop believing in love overnight. Nathaniel said nothing, and somehow his silence encouraged honesty more than words would have. Emily exhaled slowly. It happens little by little, she admitted. One disappointment at a time. The waiter arrived with menus again, but Nathaniel barely glanced at his own before speaking. The grilled salmon for her. Extra lemon. No wine tonight. Emily looked up in surprise. How did you know I was going to order salmon? Nathaniel finally looked at the menu as though pretending to consider his own meal. Lucky guess. But Emily noticed the faintest hesitation before he answered. Another strange detail. Another moment that made her feel like this man somehow knew things he should not. And for you, sir? The waiter asked. Ribeye. Medium rare. Once the waiter walked away, Emily folded her arms carefully. You still have not explained why you needed Victoria to think we are together. Nathaniel leaned back slightly in his chair. Victoria and I were engaged once. Emily blinked. Engaged? 3 years ago. Emily glanced toward the other side of the restaurant where Victoria now sat laughing beside the man who had entered with her. Then why does she care who you are with now? Nathaniel's expression darkened slightly. Because some people do not like losing access to power. Emily understood that answer more than she wished she did. Ryan had changed too once promotions and money became more important than family dinners and bedtime stories with their son. She hurt you, Emily said quietly before she could stop herself. Nathaniel looked genuinely surprised by the observation. Then he gave a small shrug. I survived. Emily noticed he answered like a man who had spent years pretending pain did not matter. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated suddenly inside her purse. The screen lit up with the name Mrs. Green, Liam's babysitter. Emily immediately answered. Hello. Emily, sweetheart, I am so sorry to bother you, the older woman said gently. Liam woke up with a bad dream. He keeps asking when you are coming home. Emily's entire face softened instantly. Is he okay? He is fine. Just missing his mom tonight. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Guilt arrived right on schedule. Tell him I will be home soon. Take your time, Mrs. Green replied kindly. You deserve one nice evening. Emily hung up quietly and looked embarrassed the second she realized Nathaniel had heard everything. I should probably leave, she admitted. My son gets anxious at night sometimes. Nathaniel's expression shifted the moment she mentioned her son. Softer somehow. More attentive. How old is he? 6. What is his name? Liam. Nathaniel repeated the name quietly under his breath like it meant something important. Emily noticed it immediately. What? She asked. Nothing. But his voice sounded distant now. Thoughtful. The waiter arrived with their meals and Emily suddenly realized this was the nicest restaurant she had entered in years. White tablecloths. Crystal glasses. A steak that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Yet somehow the strangest part of the evening was not the luxury around her. It was the fact that Nathaniel Brooks kept looking at her like she mattered. Emily reached for her fork carefully. You know, she said softly, most wealthy men would never sit down with someone like me. Nathaniel looked directly into her eyes. Someone like you? Emily gave a small awkward laugh. Single mother. Divorced. Struggling. Invisible. Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost instantly. Emily, he said quietly, I do not think you understand how impossible it is for a woman like you to ever be invisible. Emily forgot about her food completely. Nathaniel's words settled somewhere deep inside her chest, uncomfortable and warm at the same time. No man had looked at her that way in years. Not with admiration. Not with certainty. After her divorce, most people saw her as tired before they saw her as beautiful. A struggling single mother trying to hold herself together with grocery coupons, late rent payments, and caffeine. But Nathaniel looked at her like none of those things existed. Emily lowered her eyes quickly, suddenly unable to hold his gaze. You barely know me, she whispered. Maybe I know enough. The answer sent a strange nervousness through her stomach. Emily picked up her water glass just to give herself something to do with her hands. You keep talking like we have met before. Nathaniel cut into his steak carefully without answering right away. Have you ever helped someone and forgotten about it afterward? Emily frowned slightly. I do not know. Probably. Some people do not forget. Emily studied him closely now. The restaurant around them faded into background noise while pieces of the evening slowly stopped making sense. The way he knew her first name. The way he ordered her dinner correctly. The way he kept watching her with quiet familiarity instead of curiosity. Then she noticed something else. A folded photograph barely visible inside the leather wallet resting near his plate. The edge of the picture looked old and worn from being handled too often. Emily was not trying to stare, but something about it caught her attention immediately. Nathaniel noticed her eyes shift downward and calmly moved the wallet farther away. Too late. Emily had already seen enough to freeze. Blonde hair. Blue coat. A woman holding a little boy's hand. Her breath caught instantly. Wait. Nathaniel looked up. What is it? Emily pointed toward the wallet carefully. That picture. For the first time all evening, Nathaniel seemed genuinely unsettled. Emily. That woman looked like me. Silence stretched between them. Emily's heartbeat quickened. Why do you have a picture that looks like me? Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. It is complicated. That is not an answer. He leaned back slowly, studying her face as though deciding something important. You are observant. Emily almost laughed from disbelief. No, I am confused. Before Nathaniel could respond, movement across the restaurant interrupted them again. Victoria Whitmore was walking toward their table for a second time, except now the polished smile on her face had vanished completely. The man beside her stayed behind near the bar. Victoria stopped beside Nathaniel with controlled calm. Your assistant just informed me you canceled tomorrow's meeting, she said coolly. Again. Nathaniel's expression became unreadable. Tonight is not the time. Victoria's eyes shifted toward Emily. Apparently not. Emily instantly felt out of place again. I should go, she said quietly, beginning to reach for her purse. But Nathaniel stopped her gently. Stay. One word. Soft. Certain. Emily's fingers froze against the edge of the table. Victoria noticed everything. The hand movement. The tension. The attention Nathaniel gave Emily without even realizing it. Interesting, Victoria murmured. You never looked at me like that. Nathaniel did not answer. Somehow that silence felt louder than an argument would have. Victoria gave a small bitter smile. Do you know what his problem is, Emily? She asked suddenly. Emily blinked. I really do not think this is my business. Nathaniel does not let people close unless they become an obsession. Nathaniel's voice sharpened instantly. Enough, Victoria. But Victoria ignored him. Her eyes stayed locked on Emily. So if he is sitting here pretending to play husband tonight, she said softly, you should ask yourself one question. Emily felt tension climb her spine. What question? Victoria tilted her head slightly. How long has he been watching you before tonight? The question lingered in Emily's mind long after Victoria walked away. Nathaniel remained silent for several seconds, his jaw tense as he watched his former fiancée return to her table across the restaurant. Emily could suddenly feel her pulse in her throat. Was she telling the truth? She asked quietly. Nathaniel looked back at her. Victoria enjoys provoking people. That is not what I asked. He held her gaze calmly, but this time Emily noticed hesitation behind his eyes. Tiny. Controlled. Real. I knew of you before tonight, he admitted carefully. Emily sat back slowly in disbelief. How? Nathaniel looked down briefly, almost like choosing his words mattered more than usual. A few years ago, I was going through a difficult period. Emily waited. And you were kind to me. Emily frowned immediately. I would remember meeting you. You did not meet Nathaniel Brooks. His voice softened slightly. You met someone else. Emily tried searching her memory, but nothing connected. She had spent years balancing 2 jobs, daycare pickups, overdue bills, and sleepless nights after her divorce. Most days blurred together now. I do not understand. Nathaniel glanced toward the old photograph still partly hidden inside his wallet before answering. I was not exactly recognizable back then. Emily stared at him. The idea sounded impossible. Billionaires did not become unrecognizable. Men like Nathaniel Brooks belonged in glass towers and private jets, not hidden somewhere ordinary. Before she could press further, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Mrs. Green. Liam is still awake. He wants to say goodnight before bed. Emily immediately excused herself and answered the video call. Liam's little face appeared on the screen wearing dinosaur pajamas, messy blonde hair sticking out in every direction. Mommy, he said sleepily. Emily smiled instantly. Hey buddy. Mrs. Green let me eat 2 cookies. Emily laughed softly. Only 2. Liam grinned proudly before his expression shifted with curiosity. Where are you? Emily hesitated. She glanced briefly toward Nathaniel sitting across from her. Just dinner. Liam narrowed his tiny eyes dramatically. With who? Emily almost answered automatically, but Nathaniel unexpectedly leaned slightly into the frame beside her. Good evening, Liam. Liam blinked in complete surprise. Nathaniel's voice had changed entirely. Softer. Gentle in a way Emily had not heard before tonight. Whoa, Liam whispered. You are tall. Nathaniel actually smiled this time. A real smile. Warm enough to transform his entire face. That is usually the first thing people say. Liam giggled immediately. Emily stared at Nathaniel in shock. Billionaire CEOs on television looked intimidating. Cold. Untouchable. Yet somehow this man was effortlessly making her son laugh through a phone screen. Are you Mommy's boyfriend? Liam asked suddenly. Emily nearly dropped the phone. Liam. But Nathaniel remained completely calm. What do you think? Liam studied him seriously for a second. You look rich. Emily covered her face in embarrassment while Nathaniel quietly laughed under his breath. That is also something people say. Liam leaned closer to the camera. Mommy cries sometimes after she thinks I am asleep. Emily froze instantly. Buddy? But Liam kept talking with innocent honesty only children possessed. So if you are her boyfriend, you should make her smile more. Silence settled heavily between them. Emily could not even look at Nathaniel anymore. Her throat tightened with humiliation and emotion all at once. Then Nathaniel spoke quietly. I think your mom deserves that too. Emily finally looked up. The expression on Nathaniel's face unsettled her more than anything else tonight. Because he was not looking at her with pity. He was looking at her like hearing those words physically hurt him. Liam yawned loudly into the camera. Okay. Good night. Good night, buddy, Emily whispered. Nathaniel nodded once. Sleep well, Liam. The call ended, leaving silence between them again. Emily slowly lowered the phone to the table. I am sorry about that, she said softly. Do not apologize. Nathaniel's voice remained quiet, controlled. But his eyes had changed somehow after seeing her son. Emily, he said carefully. How old did you say Liam was again? Emily slipped her phone back into her purse slowly, still embarrassed by Liam's honesty. He is 6, she answered quietly. Nathaniel nodded once, but something distant moved through his expression again, like he was quietly calculating years in his head. 6, he repeated under his breath. Emily noticed it immediately. Why do you keep reacting like that? Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment before finally speaking. Because Liam reminds me of someone. Emily gave a tired laugh. Hopefully not you. Actually, Nathaniel said softly, more than you think. Emily frowned in confusion, but before she could ask what he meant, the waiter arrived with dessert menus. Nathaniel declined without even looking at them. Emily noticed another strange detail then. He had barely touched his expensive dinner. His attention had stayed on her almost the entire night. You really should eat something, she said carefully. You have barely touched your food. Nathaniel looked down at the plate as if he had forgotten it existed. I lost my appetite. Emily suddenly became aware of how intimate this conversation felt. Two strangers sitting beneath candlelight while snow drifted beyond the windows, talking about loneliness and heartbreak, like they had known each other for years. It should have felt uncomfortable. Instead, it felt dangerously easy. Nathaniel folded his hands together loosely on the table. Do you remember volunteering at St. Mary's shelter about 7 years ago? Emily blinked in surprise. St. Mary's? On the west side. Emily searched her memory slowly. I volunteered there during Christmas 1 year. Nathaniel watched her carefully. Only 1 year? I was pregnant back then, Emily said softly. Money was tight, but I remember thinking other people probably needed help more than I did. Nathaniel lowered his eyes briefly. You brought coffee. Emily frowned harder now. What? And gloves, he continued quietly. There was a snowstorm that week. Emily stared at him as pieces of memory slowly returned. A freezing December night. Crowded shelter hallways. Volunteers carrying donated blankets and paper cups of coffee. There was a man sitting outside near the back alley, Nathaniel said. Everyone else walked past him. Emily's breath caught slightly. She remembered that. Barely. He looked terrible, she whispered. Like he had not slept in days. Nathaniel nodded slowly. You sat beside him anyway. The restaurant around Emily disappeared completely now. That was you. Nathaniel finally looked directly into her eyes. Yes. Emily could hardly process the image in her head. The exhausted man she vaguely remembered had been wearing an old gray coat and had looked emotionally shattered, staring at the snow like he had nowhere left to go. She had never seen his face clearly beneath the hood. You barely spoke, she remembered softly. You looked? She stopped herself. Broken. Nathaniel finished the thought for her. I was. Silence stretched gently between them. Emily suddenly remembered offering that stranger her coffee because his hands had been shaking from the cold. She remembered sitting beside him for nearly 20 minutes while he stared at the street without talking. Most of all, she remembered the thing she had said before leaving. You told me, Nathaniel said quietly, that surviving another day was enough for now. Emily felt chills race through her arms. You remember that? Nathaniel's eyes never left hers. I remember every word. Emily sat speechless while emotions she could not explain tangled inside her chest. 7 years ago she had been exhausted, pregnant, scared about her own future, and completely unaware she was speaking to a man who would one day become one of the richest people in Chicago. "Why did not you say something earlier?" she whispered. Nathaniel gave a faint smile filled with sadness. "Because I wanted to know if kindness still looked the same when nobody knew who I was." Emily swallowed hard. "And?" Nathaniel leaned slightly closer beneath the candlelight, his voice quieter now than it had been all evening. "It does." Emily could not stop staring at him. The man sitting across from her no longer felt like the distant billionaire she had seen on magazine covers. Suddenly she could picture the exhausted stranger from years ago sitting alone in the cold with hopelessness written all over his face. Back then she had been overwhelmed with her own problems. Pregnant. Working double shifts. Terrified her marriage was already falling apart. Yet somehow Nathaniel remembered every detail of a conversation she could barely recall. "Why were you there that night?" she asked softly. Nathaniel looked toward the snow outside the restaurant windows before answering. "My father died 3 weeks earlier." Emily's chest tightened immediately. "I am sorry." He nodded once. "After he passed away, the company board tried forcing me out. There were lawsuits, public scandals, reporters outside my apartment every day." Emily listened quietly while Nathaniel's voice remained calm, but she could hear the weight beneath it now. "Everyone around me suddenly became transactional. Lawyers, investors, people pretending to care while calculating what they could gain." His eyes returned to hers slowly. "Then you sat beside me without asking for anything." Emily swallowed hard. "I did not know who you were." "Exactly." The words lingered between them. Emily looked down at the tablecloth, overwhelmed by emotions she could not sort through. "I was not doing anything special," she whispered. "You gave me a reason to survive the week." Emily's eyes lifted instantly. Nathaniel's expression never changed, but his honesty hit harder than dramatic emotion ever could. "Most people underestimate what kindness does to someone who has not felt human in a long time," he said quietly. Emily felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. For years she had believed her life amounted to failure after failure. A broken marriage, financial stress, loneliness, endless sacrifice nobody noticed. Yet somehow one small act from her worst year had stayed with someone forever. "Nathaniel," she started softly, but he interrupted gently. "I looked for you afterward." Emily froze. "What?" "Not immediately. At first I assumed I would never see you again." He gave a faint humorless smile. "Then the company recovered. Life became busy again. But every year around Christmas, I kept thinking about the woman who handed coffee to a stranger in a snowstorm while she was pregnant herself." Emily's heart began beating harder. "You searched for me?" Nathaniel nodded once. "It took time." Emily did not know whether to feel touched or unsettled. "That sounds slightly terrifying when you say it out loud." To her surprise, Nathaniel laughed softly under his breath. "Fair." Then his expression turned serious again. "I only wanted to know you were okay." Emily shook her head slowly in disbelief. "And tonight? Was this planned?" Nathaniel hesitated just enough to answer the question without words. Emily leaned back slowly. "You knew I would be here. I knew there was a reservation under your name tonight." "How?" Nathaniel looked almost reluctant to answer now. "Ryan Carter works with one of my subsidiaries." Emily's stomach dropped immediately at hearing her ex-husband's name. "You know Ryan?" "Not personally." Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. "But I recognized the reservation date when I saw it." Emily suddenly understood. He had known exactly what tonight meant. The anniversary, the humiliation, the loneliness. "So you came because you felt sorry for me?" she asked quietly. Nathaniel's expression changed instantly. No, the answer came too fast. Too certain. Emily looked at him carefully while emotions tangled painfully inside her chest. "Then why?" Nathaniel held her gaze for several seconds before speaking. "Because 7 years ago, you sat beside a man everyone else ignored." His voice lowered slightly. "And tonight, I could not stand watching someone ignore you." Emily felt emotion rise so suddenly she had to look away before it showed on her face. Outside the restaurant windows, snow continued falling softly across Chicago, while candlelight flickered between them. Then Nathaniel reached into his wallet slowly and slid the old photograph across the table toward her. Emily picked it carefully. The picture showed her standing outside St. Mary's shelter years ago, one hand resting against her pregnant stomach while snow fell around her. Her breath caught instantly. "Who took this?" she whispered. Nathaniel's eyes softened in a way she had never seen before. "I did." Emily held the photograph carefully in trembling hands while the restaurant around her disappeared into distant noise. She barely recognized herself in the picture. Her cheeks looked flushed from winter air, her coat too thin for the snowstorm, one hand protectively resting over the child she had not even met yet. But what unsettled her most was not the photograph itself. It was the realization that someone had looked at her during one of the hardest moments of her life and seen something worth remembering. "You kept this all these years," she whispered. Nathaniel nodded quietly. "It reminded me there were still good people in the world." Emily could not speak for several seconds. Her throat felt painfully tight now. "Nathaniel, this is—" She stopped, unable to find the right word. "Overwhelming," he offered gently. Emily let out a nervous breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "A little." Nathaniel reached for his coat slowly, then paused. "I should probably apologize." Emily looked up. "For what?" "For entering your life like this." His expression carried genuine regret now. "You deserved honesty sooner." Emily stared at him beneath the warm restaurant lights, trying to understand how a night that had started with humiliation had somehow become one of the most emotionally confusing moments of her entire life. "Why tonight?" she asked softly. "After 7 years, why now?" Nathaniel looked toward the snow outside before answering. "Because I saw your reservation this morning." He looked back at her carefully. "And because I know what it feels like to spend important nights pretending loneliness does not hurt." Emily felt tears threaten behind her eyes immediately. She looked away before they could fall. "Ryan forgot our anniversary 3 years in a row before he left," she admitted quietly. "But somehow tonight still hurt." Nathaniel listened without interrupting. "I kept thinking maybe I was stupid for coming here," she continued softly. "Sitting alone at a table meant for two." Nathaniel's gaze never left her face. "You were brave for coming." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her composure completely. Emily pressed her lips together, trying to steady herself. "Most people do not call lonely women brave. Most people are not paying attention." The piano music shifted softly in the background while candlelight flickered between them. For the first time in years, Emily did not feel invisible. And somehow that frightened her almost as much as it comforted her. Nathaniel stood slowly beside the table. "Come with me." Emily blinked in surprise. "Where?" "Home." Emily laughed nervously. "That sounds significantly more alarming than you intended." Nathaniel's expression softened instantly. "I meant I would drive you home." Emily hesitated. Every logical thought in her mind warned her this situation was absurd. She barely knew him. He was powerful, mysterious, emotionally intense, and somehow already woven into pieces of her past she had forgotten herself. But another quieter feeling kept whispering something else entirely. "Safe." Nathaniel noticed her uncertainty immediately. "Emily," he said gently, "you do not have to trust me tonight." His voice lowered slightly. "I just do not want you walking into the cold alone." Something inside her cracked at those words. Because after years of handling everything alone, she realized how desperately tired she was of pretending she did not want someone beside her. Nathaniel stepped closer and carefully helped her into her coat with quiet familiarity that made her heart ache unexpectedly. No grand gesture. No performance. Just warmth. Care. Attention. The kind she had gone years without receiving. Emily looked up at him slowly. "You know this is completely insane, right?" Nathaniel's eyes softened again with that rare, almost smile she was beginning to recognize. "Probably." Then he opened the restaurant door for her as snow drifted softly through the Chicago night. Emily stepped outside beside him, and for the first time in a very long time, the future no longer felt quite so empty.